Okay, who wants to start this off?
I'll go first. My name is Silal Gutierrez.
My name is Nancy Zermeno.
And I'm Carlos Rosales.
And today we're doing a podcast and we're discussing race and gender in medieval texts. And we chose the tale of Princess Fatima, Warrior Woman.
So to kind of start off, I wanted to focus a little bit on the romance in the story, specifically the romance between Layla and Sasha, because it depicts gender in a very different way, one where the roles of man and woman are reversed through their actions. If we go to the text specifically, we have quite a few moments where we get to see this reversal. The first thing that popped to me was when Sasha is actually the one who is pining after Layla, and specifically after being told that he has to keep his distance from her. There is this quote that he says. He begins to composing gloomy poetry in his head on page 16, and this is a way for him to declare his love for her. While Layla, on the other hand, is the one who is more of sound in mind, in the sense that she is the one who is attempting to keep their romance a secret because it could ultimately affect Sasha. This kind of worrying for one's beloved is an act one would normally see coming from the knight in question towards his lady and also her reputation. We see this a lot in European medieval romances. The fact that it is Layla who says the following: "Come, don't put yourself in danger," on page 21, demonstrates how gender does not completely adhere to the supposed expectations of how men and women act during the medieval period. And this kind of led me to the following idea that the expectation of women being the ones who need to control their emotions, their desires, and passionate feelings of love are negated with this reversal of gender roles in the tale of Princess Fatima, Warrior Woman. The portrayal of Sasha as the one who needs to be in control of his emotions and Layla as the more level-headed individual differs from most European medieval stories. However, the romance of Florence and Blanchefleur displays this same reversal of gender roles in a similar manner. We have the character of Florence, who swoons so much more in response to the love he feels for Blanchefleur, going as far as to composing his own kind of poetry for her, as follows in the text in lines 265 and 266. "Here lives sweet Blanchefleur, that Florence loved par amour." We get to see this kind of similarity between both texts, the tale of Princess Fatima as well as Florence and Blanchefleur.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing. And then with gender as well, tying into why, Layla isn't, the stereotypical, she doesn't really fall under the damsel in distress trope that we learned about in previous texts. And I feel like that's just common throughout the story. I feel like every female character in the story of Princess Fatima is, the opposite of what is expected of medieval women. They're the ones who are the head of reason. They're sensible. They don't really give into emotions that kind of deter them from what they're supposed to do. And there's a lot of male characters in the story that are very extreme in that sense. The one is Walid. He just doesn't he's very impulsive and reactive. And then her father and then her uncle as well, who give into who try to give into their roles as men, saying they can do whatever they want and have this control. But in the end, it just shows that they don't really know what they're doing in the sense of leadership. And that's when a lot of female characters come in to take control.
Yeah, I completely agree, because there's a scene with Walid when Fatima's face is revealed and her veil is removed. And when he first sees her for the first time, he can't control himself. Even though he was trying his best earlier to avoid having to do anything with Fatima, but as soon as he sees her face and how truly beautiful she is, he can't control himself. And it's just men have this thing of they have to be strong and they're able to control themselves, and it's usually the women that aren't able to control themselves. But just seeing this depiction of Walid just having this infatuated look as soon as Fatima takes off her mask it's kind of sad, and I think it just shows how gender in this book is extreme. In the introduction of the book, the term Amira, it translates to princess, warrior woman, and commander. So the translation is Arabic, and it signifies a title of respect and authority that Fatima should have, but that respect is missing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And moving on to the topic of gender in the tale, as I was reading the story, I realized that there's an array of female characters that are not necessarily fixed in specific roles as wives, lovers, daughters, or sisters of even male warriors. These women actually take center stage as the heroic warriors in the tale by slaying their enemies, defending their land and their sovereign, and which is similar to how the chivalric knights of medieval Europe are in a lot of the stories we read, like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And obviously the primary example is, of course, our protagonist, Fatima, who is a well-known female warrior of her time, and how even as a child, she already had the build of a strong and great warrior, being described as with strong arms, broad shoulders, and fine features on page 26, which are both masculine and feminine attributes. She is also very dedicated to being an exceptional warrior and going as far as to teaching herself how to fight, as well as creating her own weapons with which to practice and defend herself. And obviously, being a woman, Fatima is subject to assault and rape. So her skill and swordsmanship will not only provide her with an advantage for protection, but also the ability to defend others, like her family and later on her people and her king.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. How like the character, I feel like because they're very like the female characters are complex. They're not one dimensional like the other ones we've read about. Like when I think about like Rimenhild or Blanfo or any other characters like that, like in a way they are very one-dimensional because their stories and their storylines and all their things they're saying, like, you know, their lines are very just about their male love interest. It's very about like wanting to die for them, wanting to die if they're not with them, like doing everything they can to be with them and stuff. It's very like there's just one goal in the end, and that's like just to be with the male character. But like you were saying, Nancy, like the female characters here are very complex. Like they're not just mothers and wives, like they're warriors, they're leaders, they're skilled, like they have a lot to deal with. And the fact they will deal with like real world or like out of the medieval stories, things like assault and like being pushed aside and always trying to like men always after them and stuff. But the only thing that I did notice is that there is still a bit of like, I don't know if it was intentional, but there is still like this gender role that is being pushed on Fatima, and that has to do with her being a wife. Because her father, like he really pressured her to be married. And she's basically tricked into marrying Walid, and they're like, well, like, there's nothing against it, even when it's against her own will, because they do believe, even though she's, like, a warrior and a princess, like, she has this duty to be a wife as well. And she is, like, the image of a knight, because she does put up with the chivalric code, and she's like, okay, as a warrior, then I will fulfill my duty as a wife and being married. And then, obviously, like, towards the end, when she's assaulted, like, that's a sad thing they say, like that it's okay because she's married, that she's someone's wife. So there's no controversy surrounding that, which is kind of sad as you read the story. But I feel like it still goes into that thing that even though her character is very complex, we're talking about how like an amazing female character she is, like she still deals with the idea like of being a woman among men. If that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree with you. I actually want to go back earlier in the book. I want to go to page 26. I don't want to talk about her relationship with her father when she was first born. Because I think this is the thing that stuck out to me the most when reading this, is that her dad essentially didn't want Fatima or as his child because she wasn't born a boy. And he said that he would rather her be born a boy and then the boy not making it out alive, because them mourning the death of their son would be more honorable and more acceptable to have a son that died so young instead of just having a girl. And I feel like that's just the biggest issue with the gender disparity in this book, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Carlos. There is the fact that her father from the very beginning didn't want her daughter because he saw her as a liability to his position and his reputation, and he actually almost killed her for it. You know, yeah. Fatima was only ever seen as a burden to him, which is why he claimed to have a son who had died at childbirth. And it was only until she proved herself as a warrior and gained his acknowledgement when she became his daughter. There's the idea of proving oneself as a warrior, which is very similar to the chivalric code of the knights depicted in the European medieval stories. And it's something we actually get to see play out throughout Fatima's entire journey, like when she overcomes the man who had been harassing her and defeats the Bani Tai's enemies and brings back the wealth, the livestock, the the equipment and then the people. There is also her multiple triumphs in battle against well-known male warriors, which is ultimately what gave her the nickname of Daltahima, or warrior princess, as you had pointed out, Carlos. And the tale presents the journey of a female warrior woman as opposed to a male knight in most European romances. She is a woman who builds up her own reputation through these heroic deeds and ends up accumulating wealth as well as land.
I completely agree, honestly. I think what sticks out to me is that she faces all these challenges since she's been born, essentially, and just the fact that she had to embody all these stereotypical masculine qualities of strength and brilliance. On the battlefield, she has to frequently fight against her patriarchal society around her, and I'm just happy that she doesn't feel diminished by it whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to race, which later on we can also tie into gender as well, because I feel like they tie in really well. The section I wanted to focus on was Trials of Motherhood, page 80, with the birth of Fatima's son, and how the rest of this chapter and a little further on is all about that he is a black child and the idea of Walid rejecting him and not wanting him, and how there was, like I said previously, there was no controversy surrounding the sexual assault of Fatima by Walid, as her pregnancy was also something well cared for and everybody was excited for her to give birth. Yet when the baby is born, his skin is said like midnight, and they're confused because the parents are of a much lighter complexion, and obviously there's an issue with that. And then we have the rejection, which I feel like is a callback to the beginning when Fatima is rejected for being a woman, but now Walid, Fatima's son, is being rejected because he's black. So I wanted to see what your guys' opinions are on that, your thoughts, especially since it's more of a Middle Eastern novel, but there still seems to be racism and colorism.
If I were to compare it to another story, I would definitely compare it to the tale of the King of Tars, because there's also that scene of the child being stillborn and how the husband, the King of Tars, is trying to ask for help in terms of his own religion, but it doesn't seem to work. And I saw that there was quite a few similarities between the European romance in King of Tars and the racism in the tale of Princess Fatima. You get to see both children being rejected in maybe different ways. One of them is in the fact that the baby is born stillborn, whereas for Fatima, he is being rejected because he is black, and how they don't believe that he is Walid's son simply because he doesn't look like the parents, which I thought was just very interesting to read about, because there's a lot of ways in which you get to see racism kind of be brought up and kind of played out throughout the tale.
Yeah, for me, I look at it more as a social status. If we're comparing it to a different book, I would compare it going back to King Horn, how the kid gets sent away from Walid, and it's just because of the color of his skin, and it just proves there's a racial hierarchy that goes back to different trials that Fatima had to face. And I just related to King Horn, not as much on a racial side, but more on the social status, that Horn essentially fell to the very bottom. He had to fight all the way back to the top.
Yeah, and then I don't know how you feel about this, but obviously once the trials are over, they finally come to the conclusion that the reason their son is black is because Fatima became pregnant when she was menstruating. And I just thought it was interesting because menstruation, obviously today, modern times, the definition is a lot different. Some are accepting, but obviously I feel like in medieval times, there's always this thing of uncleanliness with menstruating, how it's taboo, it's almost dirty, and how it's almost women are supposed to be ashamed of it. So I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on that. The fact that, black skin, dark skin was associated with menstruation, which was thought of as dirty.
I definitely agree with your notion of the idea of menstruation being always associated with dirty, with being a taboo subject and uncleanliness. And I just think it was very saddening for me reading that part, because it hurt me to see how they were linking this idea of menstruation to the baby, and how, because it's considered to be such a taboo subject and something that society in general just doesn't like talking about, and they view it as something very unsanitary, be linked with the child, and the fact that the baby was born darker skin compared to his parents, it just hit me really hard in the heart, honestly.
I would agree. It just, it's hard to see darker skin characters or people in general, to see them at the top compared to white or lighter skin colored.
Yeah, but I think the good thing about this is with the conversation of race is that like once the child like they're like okay because they're just trying to prove that it is Wald's son. I guess to make sure that Fatima wasn't like like it wasn't I guess you would say a bastard child or a child that wasn't out of marriage and stuff like a legitimate marriage. But once that happens, they're honestly like very accepting of him. Like Fatima, not one time would say she had against the color of her son's skin tone. Like in other stories we read where they don't like that. Like she like celebrates how the beauty of it and that it just his complexion is something that makes him like a gift from God, which I think is very different and very beautiful compared to the other two that we read that like associated darkness once again with dirtiness and like even paganism and like non-Christianity and things like that. And then after that, like his skin tone has nothing to do with his ranking because at the end he ends up becoming like prophesized as one of like the greater warriors. Like everyone loves him, like his grandfather loves him, like like he's not missing anything just because he's black, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely saw Fatima's acceptance of the child to be something that really was beautiful and just different to what we saw in King of Tars when the stillborn baby ends up coming back to life because of the fact that he prayed to the princess as God and how the baby was able to just live on, and this idea of like conversion being a way to kind of be resurrected and come back to life. I definitely preferred the acceptance of Fatima's child from the very beginning and how she never once rejected him for his darker skin and she still loved him just as much as meant to be different. We'd like to thank you for listening into our podcast concerning the tale of Princess Fatima, warrior woman. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.